طيب بسم الله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله أما بعد. To carry on where we left off then, the last letter that we discussed was Al-Lam. The one that will follow is An-Nun, correct? Doing. Harf Nun is where things get somewhat interesting because we have it is referred to as a combo articulation involvement. Where the letter is coming from is the tip of the tongue. We'll draw the same diagram as we had before. Is the tip of the tongue where the litha and thanaya meet, where the gums and the incisors meet. However, and the interesting bit is that the rest of the tongue is essentially flattening it out the sound. If you say noon, the sound actually has no place to exit from when you pronounce the noon from the tip of the tongue. The noon sound itself comes from, as we just described, the gums in contact with where the gums and the teeth meet, the incisors meet. The nasality, however, comes from al-khayshum. We may discuss al-khayshum independently, or we just might do it in congruence with harf al-nun here and the second harf al-mim when we discuss the shafatayn. The reason why al-khayshum comes into play here is due to the following fact. As obviously this is blocked off, as the sound comes from the vocal cords up top, follows around the tongue, it actually has no place to exit from. If you say where the i'timad, where the pressure is here. Where the sound actually exits from is the nose. This is why if you block your nose and try to pronounce the noon, it's impossible, because then the sound will be completely compressed and will not be able to exit. There will be no sound. So there's no sound that can exit. So once again, the i'timad, the pressure where the na, noon, ni, an sound comes from is the tip of the tongue with what it comes in contact with, al-litha, above the athanaya. However, al-khayshum comes to play due to the fact that the sound has no place to exit from the mouth. Therefore, it exits from the nose, which is why if you have a blocked nose and you're reciting, your noons and your memes will sound like dal and ba. An, so na, nu, ni, an. If I block my nose, the sound will be very close to a da. Why? Because, as we're going to find out, this is actually close to the makhraj of the da. So if the sound has no place to exit from and there's compression in it, it will come very close to the nature of the da. So na, nu, ni, an, na, nu, di, ad. Same thing with the meme, but we'll get to it when we get to الشفتين. So hopefully that's clear. Yes? Final time, the i'timad, the pressure, where the makhraj actually comes from, is as we described. The khayshum comes to play simply because the tongue does not allow the sound to exit from the mouth, from the vocal cords, and it must go through the nose. Jameen. After the noon is الراء. And we'll end it with the ra, inshallah. طيب. Where the noon comes from, slightly behind it, and with a slight change in the shape of the tongue, is الراء. Notice how the blocking now is alleviated because the sides of the tongue are actually open. There's space for the sound to escape. Here, slightly behind the noon, is the sound ra, ru, di, ar. Ra, ru, di, ar. Two things to mention that are important. Number one, if we are looking from this direction here, and we're looking at the main contact points of the tongue, it will not actually be completely the tip of the tongue. It will not be like this, where all of the tip is in contact. In fact, if this is the case, where all the tip of the tongue is in contact with the اللثة here, an incorrect characteristic is going to come up, which is tikrar. And we'll discuss tikrar properly when we discuss characteristics, inshallah. If, however, the tongue those two parts of the tongue are where the contact initiates, and if the tongue is slightly curved in on itself, and there's a very small gap here between those two sides, there is space for the sound to escape and alleviate the pressure, and tikrar will not take place. So instead of saying ar, which would happen if we try to make all of the tip in contact with the litha, there is a very small fajwa, or a gap, between those two sides, which are actually those in contact with the litha, looking from this direction, which alleviates the pressure of the sound coming in, and it can exit, and you get the following light buzzing. This is because there's actually place for the sound to escape. If I was to block that, this is what would happen. That repetition, which is this light. The other extreme is to be very lax with ar-ra. Huh? That's right. Ar-ra, where the tongue is not actually touching the litha and it's just somewhere here, which is completely incorrect. Saying Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim is completely incorrect. And there's one extreme. The other extreme is what you mentioned when the whole tip is in contact with the litha. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. That's the other extreme. Correct is Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Just one ra pronounced. Final thing to mention with the ra is, like the lam, it is sometimes heavy. It does sometimes come in a full mouth case. In that case, the makhraj is exactly the same. The only thing that's changing is the position of the back of the tongue. Because as we said, the only difference between a heavy sound and a light sound is the position of the back of the tongue, nothing more, nothing less. A sound can be exactly the same in terms of its exit point, but in its characteristic is different due to the back of the tongue. I'll give you an incorrect example just to clarify the issue. The kha is the last letter to be pronounced by the throat before the qaf and the tongue. I can technically pronounce a light kha. I can say kha. The makhraj is still the same. The only thing that's changing is the back of the tongue, the characteristic. But that's just something to keep in mind. So once again, the ra correctly, if you want to pronounce the ra correctly, then the tongue slightly curves in on itself, and the main two parts of the tongue that are in contact are either side of the tip. And there's a small gap in the middle where the sound has freedom to travel. And if that is not the case, and all the tip is in contact, you're going to get the tikrar. And if there's the other extreme where the whole of the tip is far from the makhraj, you're going to get the other extreme, which is some vague sound that sounds somewhat like a ra, which is and many English speakers fall into due to the fact that the ra, that sound does not exist in English. We'll keep that in mind, inshallah, and I think we'll stop here unless there are any questions. والله تعالى أعلم وصلى الله وسلم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين والحمد لله رب العالمين. جزاكم الله خير.